Dear friends, Rabbi Eric Yaffe, thank you for your leadership for many years. Rick Jacobs, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, congratulations, if you want it. My dear friend, the great leader of your movement, Dick Hirsch, Rav Dick Hirsch, welcome. Rav David Saperstein, many of you are too young to know what an important role he was playing in Soviet Jewry movement. And, of course, my dear colleagues and partners, the leaders of Reformed movement in Israel, and my colleagues, members of the Board of Jewish Agency, dear ladies and friends, dear friends. It's not the first time that I'm on your conventions. In fact, it's the second time. The first time was in Chicago in the end of October in 1987. And as usual, it was an unusually difficult time for Jewish dialogue. There were big problems. Just now finished another round of who is a Jew issue, and all the sides felt themselves wounded and unsatisfied. There still was a big debate whether the decision of Rabbi Alex Schindler to include those who are Jews by father is destroying one Jewish people or rebuilding one Jewish people. And from Israel, in Israel there was coalition government with rotation between Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Shamir, and as a result, on every issue, there were two official positions of Israeli government, and every Jew in the world could choose with which he agrees and how he expresses his solidarity with Israel. So it was a lot of tension. But I got to say that I came to this convention and I felt no tension. I had no problems because I had a very simple message and even more simple proposal. The message was that there are hundreds of thousands of Jews behind the Iron Curtain who really want and ready to leave, and the Iron Curtain can be broken very quickly. And the proposal was to go to Washington in hundreds of thousands on the day when Gorbachev will come with the first official visit. And in those days, and especially at the beginning when this idea came, there was a lot of hesitation and fear among the leaders of organized Jewish community. They were hesitant whether it will be good, whether to make such a bold step at the time when there is summit meeting, but mainly, how can we bring so many Jews in December to Washington, hundreds of thousands? Absolutely impossible. And I have to say that I went to this convention, and I went to many other conventions. I traveled all over 32 different communities, and it was clear to me that people will come in big numbers. Because I was coming to one city and saying, I want to speak in Reformed synagogue, in Conservative synagogue, and the Orthodox synagogue. And please make sure that as many people as possible will hear. And they were saying, well, we don't need three different synagogues. We all will come together. I go to school and I speak to school, and the head of the school asks me, but it's children, so don't give them ideas. Simply explain them about the life in the Soviet Union. And I speak with them, and I speak to them about the importance of demonstration in Washington, and then they demand from the head of the school how many buses we are sending. And I came to the Federation, very far to the south, discussing the importance of coming as many people as possible, and the question is how we can make arrangements for the senior citizens, because we want to take our parents. So, and really that very day, as you maybe some of you remember, 250,000 Jews came to Washington, and that was the most powerful statement. And President Reagan then said to Gorbachev, you see, my people will not permit me to ignore this problem. You have to open the gates. And all the rest of the history. So I was not surprised. I was encouraged. I was very enthusiastic. I was not surprised by this mobilization of American Jewry, because I knew from where it started. It started 20 years before, in 1967. And let me explain what I mean, because it's very important also for today to understand what were the roots of our struggle. I was one of absolutely assimilated Soviet Jews. And assimilated doesn't mean, as we just now heard, that children after bar mitzvah don't go back to the synagogue. Assimilated, it meant we didn't know what is synagogue, we didn't know what is bar mitzvah, we didn't know what is Brit Milah, we didn't know what is Pesach, we didn't know what is Purim. We did know that we are Jews because that is what is written in the idea of your parents, and as a result, all the conversations at home are, what are the restrictions? What kind of career you can do and what you cannot? Which doors are closed for you and which we have to find a way to open. And the message, by the way, from the parents, very much in the spirit of the lecture which we just now heard about the parents, the message was very clear. You are a Jew, and that's why you must be the best in school. Must be the best in physics, or mathematics, or music, or chess. It doesn't matter in what. You must be number one, because that is the only way to overcome these restrictions of anti-Semitism. So there was nothing good in this word Jew. It was like disease. There was no positive, except for the fact that what to do? You have this disease, you have to find a way how to survive. At the same time, of course, we knew that we live under tyranny. We are very restricted now. We have no freedom. But to think for a moment that you can fight against it, of course not. Because after all, the only value which you have in your life is survival. And when it changed in 1967, after the Six-Day War, and not so much because of the war itself, but because of the changing atmosphere of the Soviet Union around us. Suddenly understand that this great victory of Israel and great humiliation for Soviet Union, which brought a lot of new hysterical campaigns against Israel and against Jews, you understand that whether you want or not, but people around you connect you to Israel. That those who love you congratulate you with the success of Israel. Those who hate you bring the whole new series of anti-Semitic jokes, but this time it's not jokes about Jews who are parasites or who are cowards or who want your money, but it's about Jews who are hooligans, who are beating the neighbors and so on. So understand that for people around you, you're connected to Israel. And you want to understand what it means. And that's when we started, in fact, in the underground, to read the books which were brought by Jewish tourists from abroad. And suddenly, you discover that only with some twist of your imagination, you can see yourself not as a part of this history of the Soviet Communist Bolshevik regime, but you are in fact the part of the history which begins from Exodus from Egypt and goes all through to the Exodus of Leon Uris. Because it is so easy in the Soviet Union to feel yourself that you're in Egypt, and it is so exciting to understand what a great history is behind you. And it's so exciting to see that, like in the book of Leon Uris, that people practically of your age can continue and build the same history. So you discover Israel, but you also discover Jewish people. Because these Jews are from all over the world, scattered all over the world, you don't know them, but they're coming and saying that we are your family. If only my father or my grandfather would stay and his brother would leave, you could be in my place and I could be in your place. And we want to help you. And you discover the state of Israel, the state which is ready to do everything, to send airplanes to the end of the earth, to help you to be free. So that's when you discover your identity, your history, your people, your country. And that's what gave us strength to fight for our rights, for your own rights, then for the rights of other Jews, and then for rights of many non-Jews. And of course, though that struggle, we could not survive even one day. After all, there was this regime which killed tens of millions of its own citizens in order to control the life and the minds of 200 million people. How this small group of Jews could survive in their struggle? It could survive only because from the very first day. In fact, even before we started our struggle, it was already the struggle of all Jewish people. When we went on demonstrations, 10 Jews for 5 minutes in the center of Moscow, arrested immediately. Next day, hundreds of thousands were going on demonstrations. And we were sending messages to their senators and congressmen, and coming and lobbying our case. And then the Western governments were calling Soviet ambassadors and were demanding explanations. And then American senators passing resolutions which were linking the interests of Soviet Union with the most important interests of the Soviet Union. And that's how the struggle was built. And, you know, I was asking many times, as the one who was like an official connection between our movement and many Jews who were coming, and I met with hundreds of them. And I saw how these young women or young students, you know, KGB was telling me that who is behind you? There are a bunch of students and housewives. Yes, it was army of Jewish students and housewives. How these young women are trembling from fear when they are bringing to us all these books and materials. And then they're trembling from fear even more when they're taking back our letters which they have to bring to Jewish organizations and to American senators and to Israel. And I'm asking them, why you're doing it? And their answer was always, because that's how we discovered our identity. That's how we discovered our family. That's how we feel that our life has a new meaning. That's how we can influence on the history of our people. So, in a way, it was the same experience. We discovered, and they discovered, that we are one people. We have great history, and we have our country, and we have great future together. And that's what was giving us a lot of strength to fight. And that's why then for 9 years I was in prison. And in the first year and a half during interrogations, practically every day I was told how I am left alone, how I'm abandoned, how the Jews of the world are afraid to mention my name because I'm a spy, and so on and so on. I knew that it's a lie. It was so obvious for me that my people will not stop fighting even for one day because of this unique power of feeling together, of feeling that we together are making this history, of our connection with our past and with Israel. Now let's move to this day. Now I'm the head of Jewish Agency. And Jewish Agency was created in 1929 by Ben-Gurion when he realized that the idea of building Jewish state in Palestine needs support not only of Zionists, not only of those who decided to live in Israel, but support of all Jewish people. And that's how Jewish Agency was created, as a big table on which Jews in Palestine then and Jews in diaspora are meeting together and discussing together and making decisions together. In fact, it was the government of Jewish people, and after 1948, it was the main organization connecting Israeli government with the world Jewry. And 3.5 million Jews made Aliyah through Jewish Agency, and billions of dollars were mobilized to build cities and towns and yeshuvim and moshavim and kibbutzim through Jewish Agency, and so on and so on. But today, by the way, of course, we have to continue saving Jews wherever they need it. And we have to deal every day with another family in Iran and in Venezuela, and with Jews of Turkey and with Jews of Tunisia. Our estimation is approximately 70,000 Jews are in the communities of risk. But overwhelming majority of Jews, 94% of Jews of diaspora, live in the free world. And there the question is not how to save them. There the question is how to strengthen our identity, how to strengthen our connection with our history, with our communities, and with the State of Israel. And I have to say that when we are looking for the ways how to strengthen our Jewish identity, it is you, American Jews, who discovered that the best way for this is Israel experience. That's how the birthrights was born. I remember that big debate in the Israeli government in 97, 98, whether we should really give money to these rich American Jews in order they will bring for free trips their children. Isn't it something against the laws of nature? They have to give us money. Why should we give? And I am very proud by the fact, by that day when Charles Bronfman and Michael Steinhardt, together with me, came to Prime Minister then, Bibi Netanyahu, and he gave a letter, the first obligation of Israeli government, yes, to invest in the birthright. And since then, 300,000 young Americans visited Israel for 10 days, and as you know, it creates a very different situation. But the question, interesting question is, why? And there is very powerful statistics you can hear to you, and Sachs and Steve Cohen are speaking to you. They disagree on almost everything except one thing, about great influence of Israeli experience, short trips and long trips on Jewish identity. So the question is, how it is that 10 days of some kind of trips, not very heavily educating trips, how they can influence on the decision which people make 10 years after this. And my answer is, and I met, being involved in these programs and meeting with thousands of youngsters, my impression is that what happens with them in Israel, that they discover that they are part of much more interesting story than they thought before. They discover history, and it's so easy to feel history in Israel. They discover people, it's so easy to feel connection with many different Jews in the world. And they discover the connection with the state which was created by Jewish people. So it is very similar experience to ours, maybe in different, less dramatic or different situation, but very similar experience. And then after short trip comes longer trip. Jewish Agency for 7 years already is, together with the government, has a very special and important program, Masa, Journey to Israel. Young Jewish students coming from 6 months to 1 year to Israel. And it has tremendous influence on their future, tremendous influence for strengthening their Jewish identity, Jewish pride, their connection with their people, with the State of Israel, and with their communities. Again, you can ask Sachs and Steve Cohen, they made a lot of studies about it. And here I want to challenge you. One would think that Reformed movement, the first movement which recognized in 1970 or declared that in order to be rabbi you have to spend 1 year in Israel. Yes. So one would think that you will be also the first movement actively involved in these programs and sending young students for 6 months to 1 year to Israel. Such a wonderful program. And for every dollar which we put, the government gives us another dollar. So we don't have any other program like this. And the government says, we are ready to pay for more. I have to say we have 200 different tracks, because different tracks meaning that people who come in to get different type of professional education, or different type of spiritual experience. And in fact, we can create different track only practically for every Jew. One Jew wants to learn dancing, another wants to be a chef, another wants to be best in physics. We can propose programs for each of them. And of course, a lot of education about how to be a Jewish leader, about the history of Zionism, about Hebrew, and so on. So one would think that many of these tracks will be adopted by a Reformed movement. I have to say that at this moment, there are 3 tracks, altogether a little bit more than 100 students who are specially developed with the help in partnership with the Reformed movement. And I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you, let's make, instead of 100 students, 2,000 students. I promise me we will find ways to do it. Here is great instrument, great tool to build the future leadership of your own communities. And you have to use it. What is needed? Of course, we have financial problems. Of course, the government says we are ready to put 1 million more, bring us 1 million more. But the first thing is not financial problem. The first thing is commitment, determination of the leaders of the communities, of the rabbis, of the heads of your schools, to make sure that young generation will spend essential time in Israel, and but this will strengthen their Jewish identity. But when you're speaking about strengthening Jewish identity, it's not only about Jews of diaspora. In Israel, we also have a problem, we have a need to strengthen Jewish identity of Jews living in Israel. Because when you are becoming Israeli, and when you think that Israeli is replacing Jewish history, then very quickly you're weakening your identity. You're thinning your inner strength to defend your country, to defend your people, to be part of your people. And I have to say, the best way to strengthen Jewish identity of Israelis is to have diaspora experience. When I'm speaking to our shlichim, and the Jewish agency has at this moment 250 shlichim in America, young shlichim in the communities, our shlichim on the campuses, shinshinim, shnat shirut, young children after the school, before the army, going for 1 year, and many others. And when I'm speaking to them, I don't have to explain them what is Jewish identity. They understand it very well, and they are becoming, after this, the best messengers to Israel about importance of Jewish identity. I'll give you one example. I recently was in Toronto, speaking with a group of Shinshinim, children in their 18s who went for 1 year to work in Jewish communities. And on one hand, I hear from the heads of the schools and the head of Jewish Reformed Synagogue about how important for them is the presence of these people, how it changes, how it improves, how it makes it more exciting. On the other hand, I hear from a young girl who's 18 years old, who says that for all her long life in Tel Aviv, all her long 18 years in Tel Aviv, she never had so much Jewish experience as 1 month of life in a Jewish temple in Toronto. So I have to say, again, look, it's not so simple to negotiate with the army that they'll give permission to these youngsters to postpone for 1 year. At this moment, we have like 100. I am ready to negotiate and to get permission for 1,000. But for this, again, your communities, your synagogues, your schools have to understand how it is important, how it is good for us, how it is important to bring your people to Israel, but also to bring Israel to your communities. And we will do it. It's a great joint venture between us and between you. Now, and of course, speaking about Israel, in Israel, it is very, very important to strengthen Jewish institutions of Reformed movement in Israel. Well, and if you think that while I'm saying it, I'm criticizing Israeli government, I'm criticizing you. Because, yeah, of course, Israeli government, we have our problems and we have constant negotiations that there should be more just distribution of the state budget, but Jewish agency, which is having big financial problems and which is trying to divide its budget, is putting every year a few $1 million into our support of reformed and conservative movement. And I have to say, it's not enough. They need much more. Their Jewish institutions are extremely important for Israeli democracy. It's up to you to support them. And I have sent a message that I have to finish. Okay, I'll try. I want to say that one of the most important, maybe, roles of Jewish agency is that it's unique table at which the government, the Jewish communities of the world, and religious streams are sitting and discussing. There is no other table in Israel, maybe in the world, where these people can discuss these problems together. And as a result, we were the first who warned the government a year ago that the new round of debates, who is a Jew, is coming, because one of the laws, which in the beginning was a very good one, but because of the amendments becomes very dangerous. It undermines legitimacy of reformed and conservative movement. And when some people in Knesset tried to ignore our warning and pass the first hearing the dangerous potential legislation, we, together with federations, together with your leaders, we organized a real lobbying, and as a result, it was stopped. As a result, Prime Minister told Natan, you started it, now you solve it, and there was created a special dialogue table between the government and representatives of the movement, where I am co-chairing it together with the Secretary of the Israeli government. And I can assure you that because of our work there, I can assure there is no chance there will be passed legislation undermining legitimacy of your movement. We hear voices about the danger for democracy in Israel. And I'm not going to speak for the government. Here you have our Minister of Defense. But one point I want to mention. You know, probably most of those things or proposals by our legislators which you don't like, I think most of them I also don't like. But when you say, and it means that there is no democracy in Israel, I ask you, does democracy mean that members of Knesset cannot make proposals which I don't like? No. It means that our legislative, executive, and juridical bodies have to work in such a way as to guarantee the rule of majority on one hand and the rights of individuals and minorities on the other. And I have to say, it's not only think for a moment which of the legislations which irritated you, upset you, angered you, which of them passed and became the law. You'll find out that not a one. Because some of them are stopped by Prime Minister, some of them only passed the first hearing and then are corrected, and some of them, or one of them which did pass, was stopped by the Supreme Court. That is the real democracy. But to work for this democracy, to strengthen it, we need your partnership. So send more of your representatives to Israel. Strengthen your community in Israel. Bring more shlichim from Israel to your communities. That's real contribution to our democracy. And the last point which I want to mention here is that your great leader, Alex Schindler, until the last day of his life, was talking by telephone with Natan and was asking the president to pardon him. And as the one who spent many hours in discussing with the leaders of the United States of America, with the leaders of Pentagon, with the leaders of CIA, and with the leaders of Israel, this problem, and with the leaders of Jewish community, I know how in those years, in the end of the 90s, was difficult to take this standard position, and which was continued also by Eric Joffe and David Zaberstein, and maybe probably many others. Then Alex Schindler was writing and saying that there was a crime, there was a huge mistake of Israeli government, but there is absolutely disproportionate punishment. If it was true 12 years ago, of course it's true today. So I do hope that with your new leadership, with the fact that today there is one voice of Israeli government and American jury, that there are so many leaders, former leaders of Pentagon, State Department, and CIA who appeal for the release of Jonathan Pollard, I hope finally it will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mr. Sharansky, for honoring us with your presence tonight and for the important message you've shared with all of us this evening. Even as we focus on this evening on Israel, we are reminded of our fellow Reform Jews around the world. At this biennial, for example, we have the largest contingent in our history at the biennial from Great Britain, and we welcome all of them here with us. Delegates from 7 other countries make this biennial richer by their presence. Our support for these communities is made real through our partnership with the World Union for Progressive Judaism. And we are pleased this evening to welcome their new president, Rabbi Stephen Fuchs. Rabbi Fuchs' leadership is already being felt in our worldwide effort to engage Reform Jews and nurture Reform Judaism. That work is especially critical in the states of the former Soviet Union, and we share the World Union's excitement about their new tool to increase Jewish literacy. The very first Russian translation of the Plaut-Bamberger Torah commentary was just released. Now an entire generation of Jews can participate in learning Torah using a progressive approach and commentary. We congratulate Rabbi Fuchs and the World Union on this incredible accomplishment.
Mr. Sharansky, I present this, the first ever non-Orthodox Torah commentary produced in Jewish history, now, as you heard, in Russian translation, with the same pride and joy that I was privileged to present it in Kiev this past Sukkot, in Hatikva congregation of our Rabbi Alex Duchovny, to their first ever confirmation student, a 16-year-old lad, after he read for the very first time from the scroll of the Torah.
Thank you.